will call to order the meeting of the Public Safety and Welfare Committee on this Monday, February 28th at 5:30 p.m. Please note the roll. And then I am calling for any public comments. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment? Come up to the podium and make sure the microphone is on with the green light.
Thank you.
So most of you know me. My name is Rye. I live at 692 Aspen. I'm a District 2 alder here for the city. But today I'm just here to voice my strong support for decriminalization here in Verona. After 50 years of the war on drugs, the supply and use of drugs hasn't only increased, but has created a massive illicit market that contributes to violence, amplifies conflict, and breeds corruption. We learned this from alcohol prohibition. Why would it not also apply to drug prohibition? Poorly designed drug policies and the criminalization of people who use drugs and harsh enforcement measures have fueled social marginalization, public health crises, and massive incarceration, particularly for people of color, folks with mental health issues, people in poverty, and other folks from marginalized communities. What does this mean for Verona? Sorry, I'm very nervous. As you can see from the sheets I've given you, with data kindly provided by Chief Bernie Coughlin and the PD, drug arrests have spiked in the last 2 years. You might also notice how disproportionately people of color are impacted. For a group that altogether makes up less than 10% of the total population of Verona, they make up close to half of all drug arrests and citations. The war on drugs is in reality a war on people. We have the responsibility as a city to ask if our current policy is doing more to help or to hurt. We have 50 years worth of data proving the incredibly damaging impacts of our current policy. We are not helping. We owe it to the people of Verona to do better. Please recommend decriminalization to the Common Council so that we can make those first steps toward a better future. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Are there any other people who would wish to speak during public comment? And just state your name and address before you do.
Hi, my name is Jamie Williams. I live at 1171 Canterbury Pass in Verona, in the Canterbury, well, anyways, in the Cathedral Point neighborhood. And I just came here in support of the decriminalization. I don't know what the correct terminology is for it, but that's what I came here for.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak during public comment?
Hi, my name is Mara Helmke. I live at 460 Daisy Court in Verona. I'm here as well to talk about the decriminalization of marijuana. I'd like to see that investigated further by the city, given the numbers that Rye had shared with us about the disproportionate amount of people of color being impacted by this law. I would like to see us investigate this further and see what we can do to eliminate penalties on marijuana. When people who are caught with marijuana by the police. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak during our public comment portion?
Yes, I'm Kate Cronin, 204 North Schumann Street, also District 3 Alder, here to encourage the Public Safety Committee to examine the parking restrictions around the Badger Mill Middle School that had been put in place when it was still the high school. I think we're seeing a different parking and pickup and drop-off situation, but also we are seeing neighbors who, the houses that are around those schools are some of the oldest in Verona, and so tend to have short driveways and one-car garages. So when we do have residents who are impacted both by the alternate side parking for winter and then at 7 a.m. having to move their cars again based on the parking restrictions. I would be interested to see if there's any way we can maybe shrink the radius of the number of streets and households that are affected by that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to speak during public comment? Head up to the podium if so.
Hi there, Rohit Yamraju, 314 South Main Street, Verona. I too would like to support the decriminalization of marijuana for many of the reasons laid out by Rai. In my studies as well, I think I have seen a lot of evidence that indicates that it's disproportionately targeting certain types of demographics in a way that I think productively as a society we don't want. And so any evidence that we can use research-based to affect policy is the way to go, I think, and I encourage you to move forward.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, last call for public comment. Anyone else wishing to make public comment? Okay, then next we will on to approval of the minutes from the January 14th Public Safety and Welfare Committee meeting.
Move approval.
I got a question for you, or a request for a correction on those minutes first under item 2. Christensen's last name is spelled wrong. It should be Christensen, just FYI.
Move to accept the recommended changes and accept the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Are there any other changes or corrections? Okay, all in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the minutes are approved. Next, we have discussion and possible action regarding a special event permit application from Stacy Burkhart, Verona Area Public Library Director for the Word on the Street 5K Run Walk on Saturday, April 30th, 2022.
Good evening. This is an event that has been held in Verona several years. There was a brief delay in the event in regards to the COVID pandemic, but I believe they did do some fundraising online, or did a virtual 5K, but this event's been held multiple times in Verona, and it's always a very successful event for the library. Nothing's really changed from the previous years regarding this event. As the application says, it'll be on April 30th from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Roughly, they will have, they will have multiple runners that will begin at the library and proceed down to the east, to Jefferson, Silent Street to Jefferson, and the directions are included, I believe, in the packet there. But the biggest concern is regarding the intersection of Main Street, Verona Avenue and Franklin. But we do have an officer that will be staffing that intersection just to make sure all the runners get through safely. And then they proceed south to Valley View over to Lincoln, and then Lincoln back north to by the pedestrian path bike trail there. So they do a loop through there and then enter Badger Prairie Park, and they'll finish back at the library. So what's kind of neat about this event is they take chalk and they write quotes from books along the route so that people have an opportunity to kind of read as they're running. Kind of a neat thing that is pretty unique to these 5Ks. We usually don't see anything like that, so that is definitely positive for the event. We've never had any concerns from any residents regarding this event. We do post no parking signs for it as well on the sides of the street that the runners will be on, simply because, again, a lot of these streets are, there are no sidewalks as well, and we want to ensure that there is enough space there for the runners to run. So we will handle no parking signs in those areas where the runners will be running. There's no alcohol at this event, nothing in that regard, so we have no concerns there. We don't normally, and we haven't done any type of background check regarding this because it's being held by a city department, and so we have always waived that. So in regards to the officer present as well, we do not charge for that service, simply because, again, it'd be from one city department to another. So it's a relatively very minor impact in regards to how much time to get everybody across in that intersection. So we'll likely use one of our on-duty officers for that responsibility. I believe Ms. Burkhart's here. If there's anything else that I have not covered that she'd like to include, by all means, but I have no concerns with this event.
All right, thank you for the explanation. Is there anything else you want to add, Ms. Burkhart? Okay, so she said no, that pretty much summed it up. I love, too, the play on words, word on the street, like literally printed on the street. It's pretty awesome. So I'll make a motion to approve the special event permit application from Stacy Burkhart, Verona Area Public Library Director, for the Word on the Street 5K Run Walk on Saturday, April 30th, 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And that is passed. The next item on the agenda is discussion and possible action regarding a special event permit application from Lauren Burkle, Glacier Edge Elementary PTO, for the Glacier Edge Color Run on Wednesday, May 4th, 2022.
I believe she's here as well. Thank you. This is another event that has been held multiple times in Verona. It's also a very positive, successful event with little impact on the city itself. So they begin at near Tollefson Park by the school, and then they proceed to run past the Boulder Brew House and then back around to the front of the school. So they reach all the way to Tower Park and then turn around and basically come back down Wayland Road. This event is being held on the sidewalk, so there is no concerns with a bunch of kids running in the streets. They do have several volunteers that will be staffing intersections just to make sure the kids get across safely. They know that they can't stop any traffic or direct traffic in that regard, and they will be visible as well. They're working with race day events for those intersections. They'll be putting some cones out, just again, more as a precautionary measure, not to funnel or channel any specific traffic, so that just they'll have that as a safety crutch in place there. Let's see here. They did submit an application to the Parks Department in regards to, obviously, the transition with our new Parks Director. Just asked that they make sure that they reach out to the parks to make sure everything is good to go there. I don't see it being an issue, but we have had that transition with the Parks Director, so I know he's still trying to get his feet wet and just wanted to make sure that things are kosher there, but they did submit all the paperwork they need to utilize the park in that regard. They will be throwing it's colored, it's like a powder, but it is non-toxic. It's natural, it's a cornstarch, and they'll be throwing that color at two different locations, Tollefson Park and Tower Park, and then they usually try to clean that up later with just some like leaf blowers, just to kind of get the majority off. But it's, again, it's natural, non-toxic, so we don't have any concerns with it there. The only contingency to put in place here with this would be in regards to the certificate of insurance. The reason being is that that does not, I should say the current certificate of insurance expires May 1st, so they won't get their new certificate until after that. So they could submit one right now, but it wouldn't be valid because the event is being held after it expires, if that makes sense. So they're going to be submitting a certificate of insurance when they get it. With no concern there. We'll just forward it to Holly when we get it, like we always have done. So it'd be just a contingency for the certificate of insurance and then the background check as well.
Okay, and it's okay that they're crossing streets, even though they'll be mostly on the sidewalks?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Again, they have I believe roughly 50 volunteers that will be stationed throughout the route, and they will, again, if there are cars coming there, the runners don't have the right of way in this regard, so they will have to stop and wait for the vehicle. But they do have volunteers at each intersection as they cross to make sure that if they need to stop or slow the kids because there are vehicles coming, that they will do that.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions about this item? All right, then I'll make a motion to approve a special event permit for the Glacier Edge Color Run on Wednesday, May 4th, 2022, contingent upon submittal of a certificate of insurance naming the city of Verona as the certificate holder.
And the background check as well, please.
Oh, and background check.
Yes.
Second.
All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? And that's approved.
Thank you. If you have any questions, give me a call.
The next item on the agenda is discussion regarding parking issues near Badger Ridge Middle School.
I got a quick question before we start. In the packet, I see some descriptions and images and whatnot. Is that a proposal, or is that the current situation?
That's the current situation.
Okay, thank you.
So just a little bit of the history here. The committee saw the ordinance revisions that we recommended and you approved for the new high school last fall. And at that time, we opted to keep the ordinances that are in place today as is around Badger Ridge Middle School, because we thought that there may be the need for them. And it was unsure, we were unsure at that time how the new traffic patterns were going to work and the number of people that were going to be bused versus, picked up and dropped off. So we started last September with a complaint of vehicles, parking issues in and around the school. We worked in conjunction with school district administration. And our initial efforts were to try to educate the public, make ourselves known and enforce the ordinance that was there. We did not issue any citations. Mostly were warnings and educational effort. We came together, I believe, in late October, again at the request of school administration with DPW, our engineer, myself, city administrator, and we tried to evaluate the parking issues up there and make recommendations for improvements again. The map that you have that's included in the packet was a diagram that the school district provided to us. We actually distributed that to people that were in violation of the ordinance when we provided them warnings in an attempt to help educate. And we did that throughout the remainder of the year, October and November. And then it got better for a while, but then in early February, we received feedback, a complaint from Alder Helmke, a constituent that had reached out to her about ongoing issues, parking issues in the area, with an explanation as to exactly what was occurring. I responded to that location and actually witnessed exactly what was being described as occurring in multiple locations. To be frank, it was a pretty severe in the area of the couple block radius south of the Badger Ridge Middle School, where there were parking violations galore. On both sides of the street were being utilized. Intersections were being encroached upon. Kids crossing the parking lot and or the street, doing the best they can to get from one side to the other to be picked up. I only observed those in the afternoon. The mornings, there are parking issues there that remain as well, but they're a little less severe because most of the drop-off is simply vehicles pulling up, dropping kids off, and they run into the school, where in the afternoon it's an extended period of time for maybe 20 minutes to a half hour where people will pull up and wait for a length of time waiting for their child or student to be released from the school. So after that complaint, we assigned officers for 2 to 3 days per week, at least a couple officers, in an attempt to continue to educate the public, and we ended up issuing numerous warnings for a couple week period, and then followed up with numerous citations as well. It's gotten better, but only after enforcement, and likely temporary, because of the parking lot and the configuration that's being used right now creates queuing problems, traffic that backs up to Main Street while cars are waiting to enter, traffic that backs up on Richard Street to Main Street, or they're waiting to enter, and then they have a couple of pinch points, one in the parking lot and cross traffic, where I guess to try to explain it in layman's terms, everybody wants to get as close as they can to the front door with their car to pick up their child, and it's kind of a free-for-all. So here we are today with at least an opportunity to discuss it and for you to provide some input, I guess, for a room for improvement. You'll see in the rest of the packet there that in addition to the diagram, we included the directions that the school had provided to students and parents through their website, through ours, through social media, where we've tried to seek their cooperation and understanding of pickup and drop-off. We attached a map there as well where we have highlighted in red, yellow, and orange where parking is prohibited on the one side. So something to note there as well is all of those streets, with the exception of West Lawn, parking is allowed on the west side of the street at all times. And the east side, where it's red, east and south side of Harriet, where it's marked in red, is prohibited there on school days only between 7A and 9A and 2P and 4P, simply to accommodate pickup and drop-off, because when cars are parked on both sides of the streets, especially with the wintertime with snow, where they're encroaching on the street even further, there's a real narrow path down the middle when cars are parking on both sides, and especially being pushed further away from the curb with the snow. And it's an unnecessarily risky maneuver for kids to come down the street, in some cases down the middle of the street, to try to get into the car to be picked up. So we did make adjustments to mid-year to West Lawn, where we prohibited parking on there because that became a parking lot for many, just to pull up and use West Lawn Circle. Now, we have not enforced that in the mornings for drop-off, because a drop-off is much easier. People pull up and they let the child out, and they're really not parking for any extended period of time. So we exercise discretion there with it, but on the other locations, it's been difficult when cars continue to remain parking there and will not move, encroach on intersections, fire hydrants, all of the above, essentially. And then we included in the packet there too a photo of the no parking signs that are marked, because it's not uncommon for people to bring that to the forefront of how well is it marked, and I don't think it can be marked any better, to be frank with you. It's a ton of signage in those locations, so it's crystal clear as to where you should and should not park. It's simply people choosing not to comply with the ordinance.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. You described what the police department is doing to try and remedy this situation. What has the school district done to try to make things safer?
I can't speak for them too much, except I can tell you that we've had several conversations with them. We've had meetings. They've shared that material with us. They've sent letters to parents. They've had it on their site. They've asked us to put it on ours. We've distributed it to people, more of an educational effort. We've worked with them in a couple different meetings to make suggestions for a change in the procedure on school property, and they have opted to utilize the one that they have in place now.
It seems like, well, I know last school year, they had adults out in the middle of the parking lot, sort of directing traffic. Is that still happening?
I can't recall if it is this year or not, but we did discuss that and thought that that was beneficial in our meetings. You'll see in the diagram where they have the bus pickup and drop off seems to run fairly smoothly. It seems to be a one direction route, and that seems to flow pretty well. I think some of the contributing factors for us is that they utilize both door 1 and 5, both locations, and they create 2 loops of traffic, one in the green and one in the navy blue. And so then they have a intersecting 2 pinch points where cars actually intersect, and It's not as efficient in exiting the lot and maneuvering the parking lot.
But are those at the same time? Is release for elementary students the same time as release for Badger Ridge?
It's a little different, but they're overlapping enough where it's an issue, or continues to be an issue.
And so it seems like this is partnered with a busing issue, like maybe more of these kids could ride the bus, and then there wouldn't be as much need for
Yeah.
parents to be dropping them off and pick, if they don't live close enough to walk. I mean, I'm presuming that these kids don't live close enough to walk, that's why they're being driven to school.
That in fact is there are a couple of things, that you mentioned here that I think contribute to the difficulties we're having. One is the busing policy, where it appears as though more kids are being driven to school as opposed to busing. And COVID as well, and how that contributed. Now, how that'll change in the future, I'm not sure. It's kind of hard to say, but the school district busing policy impacts us not only with the number of students being bused or driven, but it also impacts us with the crossing guard program as well. So we've had to contend with that for years as well, so.
Yeah, and I mean, with the contributions of COVID affecting the lack of bus drivers and reasons for kids, families not wanting to ride the bus, I mean, that's understandable, like, this year, so this isn't going to be like a quick fix, if that can be remedied in the future. But are people just not using those, they're just not going through the line according to the plan, and they're waiting on the side streets for their child to walk to their car? Is that my understanding?
The volume is greater than what they can accommodate, in part, and that's probably the biggest problem. And then the other contributing factor is a lack of efficiency in which the cars are moving through those lines, especially at pickup.
So why does it take a half an hour? Or are parents just idling for many minutes before school is even released?
Yes.
Okay, so then, can we just put a stop to that somehow? Can we tell them, don't come any earlier than such and such a time? Because you don't have to be first in line. Everybody gets through the line at, when school lets out anyway.
We've made numerous attempts to educate and ask for people's cooperation, and it reached a point here in the last few weeks. The reason we issued citations is because we're out of options. So it's because people are consciously choosing not to comply. Another contributing factor are parking citations are, some might say, are quite low, or $10, and they may not serve as a deterrent to some. So that's something we should revisit.
Yeah,
as
we've
well.
talked about that before, that it's not much of a deterrent. So what are the options to remedy this situation at this point? Can we take down some of the signs, especially by the homes that are in that area where the people, the residents of that neighborhood can't park their own vehicles?
Well, I'd caution against that, at least before further evaluation, because the cars have to go somewhere. And if they're lined on both sides of the street for the first block of the, we'll say, 4 blocks area there on the south side of the school, if we remove them from the one side, which the ordinance prohibits them from parking on, they have to move another block away. That's why that ordinance is in place. So it's not an easy fix. We'll enforce the laws and take the marching orders as you determine what they are. That's not an issue from our perspective. But it's just there's too much volume there for what they can handle, and the flow of traffic and the efficiencies need to be improved.
Alder Touche?
Thank you. You know, with some of the limited feedback that I've gotten from some of the neighbors, and when I say limited, one, their challenge seems to be the alternate side winter parking rules that flip when they can only park on a certain side during certain times of the day. This is just an idea. I just want to hear what your thoughts are, but I know that we're consistent about the west side limitations on what side of the street you can park on for the schools, but I know this may sound silly, and I think it's kind of silly the more I say it, but can we alternate with, like, on even days you have to be on this side and odd days that kind of match with the snow, so as the residents are trying to adhere to the snow parking rules, the side you can't park on school days matches? Unfortunately, if I were a driver trying to get into that situation, I'd be reading the sign, looking at my watch, trying to figure out what date it is. Oh, it's an even, I need to be on the other side.
Yeah,
I mean, it's maddening, but at least I want to hear your thoughts, even though I'm saying it myself.
From a public policy standpoint, I would say your goal should be to try to keep it as pretty straightforward and as clear as possible, because if we can't get it right now, with it signed the way it is, I don't know how you can make it any clearer.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm trying to bat around a few ideas here.
Yeah, I understand. It's an issue for homeowners there. I get that. I do sympathize with them for that. And the reason that we're enforcing it is not because we want to. We receive complaints over it, and then when you make observations of the complaints and they're valid, it's picking the, I guess, the lesser of two evils. A parking citation and an inconvenience of parking your car pales in comparison to having a child hit by a car.
I agree.
And it's different now that you're talking elementary and middle school age kids. It's not high schoolers what it used to be. So it's a different problem up there, and it needs to be worked on, I think, from several angles. There's room for improvement, but I would just caution you not to make any quick decisions, because everything is going to have a domino effect. If you release parking on one side of the street, they have to go somewhere.
Right. You know, another idea is we talked about deterring, right? So citations issued in no parking zones during set times, should we reconsider the rates for these kinds of violations? Do we think that will help? I mean, $10 isn't much.
That's something we've talked about for a while, and I think at a minimum, when we get through this season of alternate side parking, which will be April 1, that we should revisit that in the off-season, so that it does serve as more a deterrent, and strike a balance that it's high enough that it does serve as a deterrent, but not too high. That you're not out writing citations because you enjoy doing it and it's a source of revenue. You're doing it as a deterrent, and you want people to comply. So, and that's something that we can discuss, but I would say at a minimum that $10 is not enough. What is enough? Maybe 25 is enough, but we can discuss that, I think, at another meeting or another time, and do some research as to what other communities are setting that at, so that you have an idea, a better feeling of what our neighbors are doing.
Okay, so if people are just blatantly not following the rules that the school district provided about how to do pickup, it sounds like drop-off is not really an issue, and then they're blatantly not following the parking regulations, then I think the only thing we can affect change with is the busing situation. So do people know that they can pay to have their child put on the bus or take the bus? Does the school district advertise that if you live within the 2-mile boundary or whatever it is, you can allow your child to take the bus if you pay a fee? Or can we reconsider the boundaries at this point in the school year? And if there are, like, is there room on some of the buses currently that could increase their capacity for the remainder of this school year?
I think those questions obviously have to involve the school administration and elected officials potentially, because they are more for them. Simply put, we're responding to the situation that is there as a result of the way that they have the parking lot laid out and the pickup and drop off. And so when you go back to drop off in the morning, just to clarify, it is an issue. There are problems with it, but they're just not as bad as they are in the afternoon or the evening. There are still issues there with everybody converging at a limited amount of time, and there's not enough room.
So our job is to make things more safe, and it sounds like anything that we've talked about doing would make it less safe for children. So I'll let you comment on that after Alder Touche's comment.
So, has any consideration been put towards making some of these streets one-way? That would reduce the amount of traffic. You know, you're only looking one direction, in theory. So, I mean, everyone's following what they're supposed to do, and then, you know, maybe there's some turnaround opportunities that the school might want to participate in. If you head up a street, it'll put you into the school, but maybe we can find a way to wrap them around the other way if they're going down the road. I'm just throwing the idea out because I think there's a volume of car issue, there's a parking issue. I think if we can get rid of one direction, it will increase some safety and possibly some traffic flow.
I don't think the one-way has been discussed yet, at least not that I'm familiar with, but we do have Jess Billmeyer, our traffic engineer here, and he and Theron are very familiar with this area and traffic studies prior to the building of the school and the transitioning to its current state of Badger Ridge, so they may want to comment on it.
I would love it if they have some ideas.
All right, as usual, Evan, you're giving me an option I haven't thought of, so you're putting me on the spot. I'll try to give you some ideas. A one-way pair, I think, would have to be Schumann northbound. If you're looking at your map, that's the road on the east side of, I'm looking at the parking restrictions map. Schumann in northbound would give them a one-way into the parking lot on the east side. And then I think you would make Marietta a one-way outbound, southbound, which kind of lines up with the U in the school, a similar pattern that they have with the drop-off and pickup. In order to reduce conflicts, I don't know if you would change Richard, but if you did, I think it would have to be one-way westbound to kind of make a U with Schumann and Marietta, similar to what's in the school parking. So what would that do? That would reduce the number of cars that are crossing at the intersections. So rather than having people approaching from 4 legs, they'd just be approaching from 2. It would push all of that turning traffic to Harriet. I feel like exiting Harriet would put more traffic turning left onto Main to go up into the city in the morning peak. I think that volume is currently split between Richard and Harriet now. So you'd probably have longer waits leaving the school during those periods. Maybe would push more traffic down to Verona Ave to use the signal with Main Street kind of off the page to the lower right. That's what I can think of at the top of my head. Anything to add?
What other ideas did you bring with you tonight? Darren, or?
Thank you. Proposal-wise, we haven't had any. With the conversations we've had, just as Bernie alluded to earlier, were conversations that we had with the school district regarding the internal circulation of the parking lot and some of the inefficiencies there about making a, overall one loop and to get rid of that conflict point that's in the middle of the lot there. We haven't had any update meetings with the school district, but I would suggest we should have one with them to talk about potential improvements on site, because Jess alluded to changes in traffic direction. That's not going to change the volume. So you're still going to have inefficiencies out here. There may be some improvements with eliminating conflict points, but the sheer volume is still there at this point. And that's the biggest driver that's creating these long queues and delays that are also backing up onto North Main. That's to kind of answer your question there, Alder Touche.
Well, I get,
What did you come with before the one-way idea came up?
I'm the one who kind of helped put the agenda together here. I think the intention tonight was to figure out what you wanted us to do with this, because ultimately, we didn't come here with a lot of ideas, because this issue came up as part of a complaint process. So I don't think we're fully prepared to kind of get into the details yet, because part of it was, we didn't want to spin our wheels on this to find out. We come here and we hear, oh, there's no problem here. So I think part of this is to, how do you want, do you want us looking at this? Because obviously, you've got the engineering side to it, and you also have the law enforcement and enforcement side of it. But just seeing, do you want us looking into this and bringing back ideas to you, or do you want us going to the district to talk about this more? We're looking for direction on kind of what you want us to do with it. Or you could have said, this isn't a problem, let's ride the school year out and see what happens here as well. So we're not fully prepared. That's kind of why Jess was kind of talking off the top of his head there. We're not really prepared at all to get into that kind of detailed conversations. We're happy to look into that, but we'd like to hear that direction of you want us to go out and do that, or if you want us to start with the district and have that conversation first, and then possibly go into the potentially one-way ways or whatever traffic pattern changes we're going to make. So I just want to be clear that we're not fully prepared to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of this tonight.
I definitely think that we need to have the city talk with the district before expending any more resources on behalf of the city to try and solve this problem, because every question that we've considered needs the expertise from the district to figure out options. Alder Touche?
Yeah, I was trying to summarize it here. So I would like it if we actually did look at one-way options. I think that is something in our control, regardless of what the school district is doing. Obviously, they're going to have a play in, coordinating and making it work. Chief, I also think that we should do some research on citation costs. See what our neighbors are doing, ask them what are their hot spots for their schools. If we talk to our neighbors, how are they handling it? Be interesting to get some inspiration from them. And then, of course, talk to the school district. See how much they care, see what they want to do. It's, my kids went to the original Badger Ridge Middle School before it moved to the old high school. And I was just looking on Google Maps, and the parking lots are the same size, but the schools are not. Significantly more children going there than there were at the original school. So it doesn't surprise me in any way that we're seeing an increased volume of vehicles going there. I do find the 2-mile limit, and I think it's actually a shorter distance for younger children. I don't know it off the top of my head anymore. I'm no longer thinking about that anymore. It's 1 mile. I mean, maybe even that gets reduced to a half mile just to encourage. Maybe it's a survey that the school can put out to their families that use that school to find out if they reduce the limit, would they use it more? So these are just ideas that I have about some conversations, some ideas, how we can partner with them. I saw Phil raise his finger. I think I'm done.
I guess, the thing we haven't addressed, right, is those residents, their complaints are that people are parking in front of their house, or more that they are not able to park their vehicles in front of their house, right? Is It's more the latter, I believe.
So the email I had seen was the struggle of families having, maintaining the alternate side parking because they're leaving cars on the road, and then also bumping into the no parking rules on one particular side during the morning and afternoon shifts sort of school. So it's really, I think, an inconvenience thing for them. They'd mentioned 3 vehicles. They have a decent-sized driveway. I know how it is when your children park behind you and you need to go to work or go somewhere. I can relate. But, yeah, I mean, that's, I would say, a challenge probably for some of the residents there, especially with growing families and multiple vehicles. So, maybe one-way roads might simplify that for them. I'm not sure. So, or that just might be the side effect of living in that area. The convenience of being by school has a cost. Thank you.
Is that enough direction?
It's definitely a start. So, progress, we can.
Who's going to follow up with the school district side on the ideas of a potential survey and adjusting, at least maybe for this school, the distance, right? I know the chief's going to handle one side, Theron's going to handle the traffic study side, or the one-way, Aaron?
Chief Coughlin and I have a meeting with the superintendent and the assistant superintendent talking about some of our crossing guard challenges, I think in about 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, Bernie. So, I mean, we can kind of just tack this onto the list of items we want to discuss, which is kind of, to your point, the survey, and then also potential, the parameters of what the walk boundaries are and busing boundaries are as part of the district. We
Great.
bring
Can
that
you
up.
take notes during that meeting and present them to us? I'd be very interested in hearing how that conversation goes.
Yeah, we can do that.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Jacobson, did you have something more to add?
Yeah, thank you. Chief Coughlin and I will coordinate on any of the details that need to be, and coordinate with the school district, of course, just like Adam said, but get into the nuts and bolts of what improvements may or not be able to be feasible down in this area. And so it'll be a group effort to keep everyone on the same page and the lines of communication open.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for all the effort you've already put into this. And I just hope things go smoothly with the future discussions with the school district, and that we're able to keep kids safe. Anything else on this topic? Okay, thank you for all your input and ideas. The last agenda item is discussion regarding marijuana and drug decriminalization in the city of Verona. I don't have an explanation to read or anything for this, so whoever would like to take the lead on that, go ahead.
I guess I can kind of go. Obviously, we had a request tonight from an older person to look at potential ordinance changes as it relates to marijuana and drugs within the city. Once again, I think we're here tonight as staff to kind of bring this forward as a request from an older, and then ultimately get your direction on kind of what you'd like us to do with this and how to proceed with it. So that's what kind of staff is looking for tonight, is just direction of how to proceed. There's no action on the agenda. This is discussion only, but like I said, looking to have direction. With me also is City Attorney Brian Kleinmeyer as well, to answer any legal questions on the legal side.
Is there a presentation or anything coming along with this, or is this just it?
Not from staff. We'd happy to answer any questions you'd have, though, regarding the kind of the request here.
I
I guess
don't know
what
if
is,
it-
what is the request?
What is the request? Thank you.
I believe the request was to look at the decriminalization of marijuana, and then also the request to look at the decriminalization of drugs in the city.
So we're doing all drugs, is that, or these are separate items, or these are just a broad, we're just going to say all drugs?
I mean, older person Kim is here. You can more than welcome to call her up as well, if you'd like to have her kind of
If the
explain.
requesting alder person would like to step at the podium, I'd be interested.
What's the question?
What
What are we
exactly
talking about?
is, yeah.
Either or both. I am here for full decriminalization. Coming from a healthcare background, I think folks are less likely to seek help and more likely to die from all drug use. But if you're more comfortable with marijuana as a baby step, I'm more than happy to pull it back to just that as well. Which is where I think Luke was when we first started this.
I have so many questions, I'm not sure where to start. Go ahead.
I'm more than happy to answer
Oh,
any.
thanks, Phil, I appreciate that.
welcome.
I mean, it's a very broad request, right? Super open-ended at this point.
So again, as city staff, we're looking for direction because I have a lot of questions about the legality of the things we're allowed to do as a city. But I can't take any funds from the city to get Mr. Kleinmeyer to answer them until we have direction from you guys.
So I guess my question, maybe we'll start back, like, what's the driving force? Like, is this request from your constituents that came to you and emailed you and said, hey, we should look at this? Or like, where is, I guess, what is the impetus for this? Like, where is this coming from?
So when I did my door knocking to get my signatures to be back on the ballot, the only thing that I had specifically called out was where do you stand on marijuana in the city? We did have one person specifically talk about all drug use decriminalization, but marijuana was the big one. Also just a personal preference of mine coming from, again, seeing the results of criminalized drug use. But also it's something that I hear talked about quite a lot, just being a member of the community.
And so I guess how would that look like? That would just be no more prosecution of any drugs.
So if you'll look at the sheet that we received data from on Bernie, so currently marijuana looks like it's only being issued citations. So it's not actually, and Bernie can correct me, it's not actually going to prosecution or being arrested. You're just issued fines. Whereas other drug use is, you're arrested, it becomes more of a bigger thing.
So then what is, I guess, how would not charging folks or giving them a citation make the city safer?
How does citing them make the city safer?
I mean, I'm asking you, I have no idea.
So I don't think it does. I think if you watch a documentary from Ken Burns about the Prohibition era, making things illegal that are continuing to be used anyway just leads to black market use, it leads to violence, it leads to people creating underground markets for things and operating in the shadows where they can't get help if they need it. And I think you'll also see that in the data, now that we have things like COVID, there's been a spike in usage and prosecution for drug-related offenses. And I think that's because on the face of it, it's a mental health crisis and people are self-medicating, which goes to a bigger problem with healthcare in the country, but we're not going to solve that. But we can solve ruining people's lives over something that is fundamentally not going to be solved by criminalizing it.
So there's talk of, I guess maybe that's a different discussion of like treatment and things like that, or is that nothing we're going to deal with?
So again, this is something that we would have to figure out with city staff, and I can't get those answers until we have the go-ahead to get those answers. At least that's the roadblock I'm coming up against.
So what happens if we wait and see what the state does on a state level? Like, is there an advantage to biding a little time?
It's been 50 years. How much longer are we going to bide our time? Also, I really doubt that the state's going to do anything given the makeup of the not governor's office.
So are you asking us to approve funding research to figure out if this is something the city should or
I
shouldn't
think
do?
Adam can better, the last email I had from Adam was that we need to get go-ahead from you guys so that we can ask Brian what we can do.
Sure. I think the question, where this kind of came to was looking into and Brian can speak to this a little bit, looking into our ability to basically, in essence, if we're not going to be enforcing our ordinances and the impacts of that, kind of on the legal side of it as well. And the direction was, we're not going to have Ryan or an associate do that research until we had direction from the committee here to, do you want us to do that research? Is that even worthwhile? So I think initially, like I said, Brian can kind of speak to this. We've looked at the marijuana side of it, of the fines, the forfeitures that the city has in place as part of that. And, in essence, you're still enforcing the ordinance, you're just dropping the fine to whatever set amount you want to make that. That's kind of where this initially started, and it's brought it into kind of looking at the holistic, decriminalization of all drugs in the city, and that's where it gets in the ability of you have federal laws, you have state laws, and the question is, do you have that ability? And if you don't have that ability, ultimately, what is the legal ramifications if we stop basically enforcement of those laws? And that's where I held up the stop sign and said, okay, I'm not sure how much it's going to cost. And if the committee doesn't have any interest in looking at this, I'm not going to spend 2, 3, whatever the thousands of dollars it would take to potentially have an associate or someone research that without at least having that direction from a committee to do that. And Brian can speak to a little bit to some of the legal side of this.
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Can you answer some of those questions?
Well, I mean, I can try. I mean, we have not researched this issue now, but what I'm going to talk about now is essentially just general, city powers, things of that nature. And I'm going to hit a number of different topics here. One, I just want to be clear. To me, there is a distinction between, for example, lowering the penalties, if the city of Verona so chooses, lowering the penalties for what amount to be municipal violations for possession of marijuana, let's say, versus decriminalization of marijuana or drugs. And so the fundamental issue, and again, I have not researched this, but I'm telling you what my initial reaction is. I don't think the city of Verona has the authority to decriminalize any drugs. The city's powers come from the statutes. We have state laws, we have federal laws that prohibit certain drugs. I don't see anything in the statutes that would give the city of Verona the authority to legalize a drug that is illegal under state and federal law. Now, the marijuana, which only rises to the level of a municipal citation, I think you have the ability to adjust what you want the penalty to be. So you could lower the penalty on marijuana. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that's where I believe your power is. But when you get into other drugs that now you're talking about, misdemeanors and felonies, those are not handled, and the chief can correct me, but those are not handled by the city of Verona. Those are handled by the district attorney's office for Dane County. And now we are talking about state and federal, state laws that are being enforced. Some other things just to contemplate, and again, I'm certainly willing to dive deeper into that or have somebody at my firm do that, but that's my initial reaction. One of the other things to keep in mind, and I'm going to say something about what the elected officials in Verona have to do, Chief. I'm going to have to turn to you with respect to oaths for police officers. But one of the oaths that elected officials, whether it's the city of Madison or the village of Wanakee or the city of Verona, every elected official has to take an oath. And I've looked at the oath, and I've looked at the oath in the statutes, and it requires elected officials to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin. Now, it doesn't specifically reference laws, it says Constitution, but one of the concerns that I have on behalf of elected officials is if the Common Council were to take the step of decriminalizing drugs, whether it's marijuana or otherwise, my initial concern is you may be in violation of your oath if you do that, because now you are essentially taking an affirmative step that says you are not going to uphold the laws of the state of Wisconsin or the federal government. Now, again, I haven't researched that, but that is a concern of mine on behalf of the elected officials. I may be repeating myself, but I just want to double back. I mean, again, the city's powers come from the statutes, and I don't see anything in the statutes that would give the Common Council of the City of Verona the authority to decriminalize drugs that are illegal under state and federal law.
Thank you for that explanation. I didn't word it very well, but I was like, well, don't we have to wait till the state does something first? So that Thank you for
Well,
that
and
explanation.
states obviously across the country have been legalizing marijuana or making changes, and they've run into, they've had to deal with that obstacle of, wait a second, it's illegal under the federal law, but states have more powers than the city has. I mean, that's a high-level answer, but it's also, I think, an accurate answer. And quite frankly, I think the federal government is kind of looking the other way right now on things related to marijuana, because they're looking at this as a state issue. But we just don't have the power that the state of Wisconsin does.
Okay, so does this body have the will to decrease the penalties?
Well, to me, that's, I mean, again,
Or is
this
that
is
not
not an
even-
action item for you tonight. I mean, I think we've taken a look as it relates to municipal citations for marijuana. I do think that you have the authority to do that if you want to, but I think you would go through the process of looking at that. That would be the process of putting that ordinance amendment on your agenda, you commenting on it, making a recommendation of the Common Council, and then it goes to the Common Council. That, I think, is the one area where you have some flexibility.
So do we
I actually have some questions.
want to
on
do
some of
that?
this real quick. So you highlighted some areas on here. I've written a few of my own notes, and Chief, is this report from you, or is this first page where it's marijuana sites by race, OWI substances, OWI sites by race? Is that your report, or is that
I don't know, is it Rye? Is that?
Rye's report?
Okay,
Sheet you sent me.
okay,
So cites, is that short for citations?
yes,
So if you got a citation, you got a fine,
yep.
but you didn't go to court. Is that correct?
It depends, you can go to court on it, yes.
You can. Okay, so this is something that goes on a person's record, criminal record of some kind?
Nope.
or- No?
No, so, yeah, half the battle here is we should probably start with a little bit of a background, educational approach, that the city does not have the ability to charge anybody with a crime, and we don't. We issue municipal ordinance citations, which are adopting state laws, but they're only a municipal ordinance violation, so they are not a crime. They're very similar to a traffic ticket. So there's a record of them, but they're not a crime. Okay? They're just a fine as to what the judge imposes. That dollar amount fine, no sentence, no additional penalties. The marijuana, probably for a long time, I'm going to say probably about 15 years, at least 10 in this county, the DA has chosen not to charge, accept any referral for criminal charges from any police department for smaller quantities, nothing less than 1 ounce will he charge as a crime. So part of the reason that we issue municipal ordinance citations is because we're giving people breaks. We give them the lesser of the two penalties. We issue them a citation because it may be a $172 fine, as opposed to sending them through circuit court and charging them with a crime and having a misdemeanor conviction on their record and potentially doing jail time and or probation. So the other thing that I'd like to mention about the citations for marijuana and other drugs, oftentimes it's our avenue of pushing people into seeking assistance, because the courts can leverage that where we can't. We'll get requests from parents at times to say, can you please help me deal with this issue I'm dealing with? Junior is out of control. And we don't know what to do with his habitual, smoking marijuana and possession. And so that's part of the equation that we deal with as well. I can say across the board, I'm guessing, I've read reports that fluctuate the percentages, but I'd say anywhere from the 50 to 90% of what law enforcement deals with is people who are under the influence of alcohol, drugs, and or affected by mental illness, or a combination of all three. And that problem seems to become, it's prevalent and it continues. It's ongoing. So obviously, my perspective is going to be quite different than other people in this room. That I don't think the use of alcohol or drugs is a positive thing for anybody. And then you mix it with other items and/or mental illness, and it just exacerbates the issue for us, and we deal with then the worst of what a community has to offer. People are having a real hard time functioning in society. So I could go on forever.
No, that's fair. I'm trying to think of this from a public safety perspective, right? So, one, I think the courts are trying to do a good job of striking a balance in a lot of areas, whether it's somebody making a poor choice, learning from it, and then recognizing they learned from it, and I think they've been very generous in a lot of situations. Are they perfect? No. I think when we talk about, there's a lot in this, just looking at the data here. There's a lot here, and Rai highlighted a bit of a race disparity here, and that makes me wonder, we don't have this, there's a lot of blacks being highlighted in your report here, and I'm wondering, why is there more? If a small percentage of Verona residents are not black, why are they getting more citations respectively? I don't know if, because you highlighted them, right, it makes me think this is the problem you're trying to solve.
Part of it.
Again, there's no specific agenda here, so I'm kind of speculating based on the data you gave me. So is that what we're trying to solve? And then for me, it's, public safety is my biggest concern. And regardless if you have mental health issues, which obviously is a problem, it needs a greater acceptance to be dealt with within our society. I also think about operating vehicles while impaired, whether it's marijuana, whether it's alcohol, whether it's an opioid, you name it, that's a safety issue, big safety issue, right? And I really hope, in looking at the number of OWIs that we've had, actually the numbers are pretty small. I'm surprised, actually, but it's, and maybe this OWI substance.
Caution. That second row that you're looking at, the OWI substance, is only drugged driving.
Oh, so not alcohol?
Not alcohol.
Gotcha.
So Rai and I had a conversation, and she'd asked for a certain amount of data, and of course you have to limit it at some point. Now, as you're doing research, if you want more data, we can pull more data, depending on, what the request is and if we can accommodate it or not. We'll do our best to do so, but what we tried to highlight there was the number of drugged driving offenses, which is what you mentioned, the concern. And then below that, the third kind of row of data was the drug arrests, which were those that we did make a referral to the circuit court for. So those, without digging into each one of them, I would say you should take this into consideration. They're likely there's a higher probability that those involve narcotics other than marijuana, or large, large quantities of marijuana, which we would believe that this wasn't a personal use, it was more of an intent to deliver. Somebody was trafficking it. I also say to you about the race issue, without digging into any of those items, a couple things you should consider. Number one, above anything else, most of what law enforcement does is reactionary. I would like to dig into all of these and find out how many were actually initiated by a police officer. Most of what we do is a response to a call for service from a business, a witness, the school, or some other member that's calling our attention, or the possession of marijuana frequently is a secondary offense, where somebody is stopped for 15 over the speed limit, and they're smoking while they're in the car, or they just had, and there's a reek of marijuana in the car.
Well, for me, that's a public safety issue.
Okay. And one more item to consider as well. 20 years ago, marijuana had a very low potency ratio, low THC levels. It was very common 20-plus years ago for that to be under 10%, oftentimes less than that. With marijuana being approved and being grown in other states, the THC level of marijuana is very potent nowadays, especially that which is being consumed by edibles. So you're talking potency levels of 60 to 90%. So it has a different impact than what it used to. Somebody would smoke a joint years ago, they had a completely different response than they do when they're eating a couple of brownies now, where it's containing 80% THC level. Things to consider. Ultimately, it's your decision as to whether or not you want to reduce citations into what, and you guys can work that out. But obviously, I don't think allowing people to use more alcohol or drugs is a good public policy, period. Getting them the help that they need for those that want the help, definitely, we're all behind that. That's what we spend a career doing, is helping people. Oftentimes, moving them into court is the leverage that's needed to get them the assistance that we ultimately get them.
No, that's fair. I'd be curious on a heat map of where these citations are being issued. And to your point, is this a secondary citation tagged into something else? Because I feel like when you look at it, if you just look at it, what I'm seeing right now, it definitely looks like there might be a race issue here. When I think of, and because we've called out Asians, blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, unknowns, and whites, because this is the data that I've been given, it just makes me, it does feel unbalanced. And even where I put in a comment here saying 4% of the Verona population is black folks. Well, I don't know if that's true in our school district or where the citations are being issued. So that would kind of help explain some of these numbers potentially. If it's outside the school district, if it's outside in other areas, it's like, why? I think that's a valid question to at least help answer why some of these numbers appear to be leaning in that direction.
They're definitely valid questions. And on the far right on that spreadsheet or data was just a list of the number of communities in which those residents that were cited or arrested are from. So yes, our population for, say, black in our city is, if Rye says is 4%, that sounds about right. Certainly is a higher population than that in our high school, and visitors, that's kind of hard to predict or hard to determine. Passerby, people who visit our city for a variety of reasons. That's kind of hard for me to make that distinction. But and how, why the numbers are the way that they are, that's going to require a deeper dive than just the initial.
I think that would help because I feel like this data is being represented one way. Back to city versus state, I applaud the states that have legalized it in various ways. I think enforcement is a challenge. I've traveled to Colorado many times for work and pleasure. I'll never forget, it's probably 5-6 years ago now, going to Denver and having to walk to pick up some supplies for an office that we were setting up and smelling marijuana at 8 in the morning in the air. And it blew my mind that people were getting high before going to work. And, I think of the social norms around alcohol. People drinking before going to work, that's a problem, right? And usually frowned upon business and even safety. And I think the rules have changed. And some people seem to think that it's okay to be, intoxicated while trying to either operate a vehicle or even perform at their job. And that to me it goes to a social, possible mental problem. I've unfortunately lost some friends to alcoholism. And having citations, having at least somebody trying to keep their eye out that hopefully ends to assistance is a good thing. So I don't know that I'm quite ready for even investigating beyond, let's see what the state does. I'm just thinking about somebody gets high and then jumps in a car and starts driving. Right now, we don't have tools to enforce whether someone's really high or not beyond how they behave and, possibly what you observe in the vehicle, right? So we have a breathalyzer for alcohol. We don't really have that yet for these other substances because that's a real challenge. And again, trying to keep public safety in mind. So for me, I'm just beyond a meeting today, and already we're spending time on you, Brian, having you here, spending money on you, having you here. I don't need to hear any more. I mean, I think we should, if anything, lobby at the state level to get them to consider what the next step can be and what should or shouldn't be legalized. Thank you.
Any other comments?
No, I mean, I think I agree with most of what Alder Touche was saying. I mean, I think for me, even right now, I think that we don't even know what we don't know yet, right? And so I lived out in Denver during the time that they legalized marijuana, and it was mind-blowing to see they kind of just said, yeah, like, this sounds great, looks like a great bumper sticker, let's legalize it, and they spent the next 5 years trying to reel it back in, and all of a sudden, make more rules, so they didn't really plan it out very well, right? It kind of was the Wild West out there. So I think, for me, if we're talking decriminalization of everything, that just, to me, it doesn't even have legs. It's like a non-starter. I don't think you'd find 5% of the population of Verona that would say thumbs up to that. That just seems like something that's too far out there for me. But similar, like we're talking about the parking situation, maybe there's a, referendum, ask people, and the numbers are not going to lie, yes or no, like, who supports this, and that's how we start. But if we're just going to, sort of make a bumper sticker statement that says Verona decriminalizes everything, and then, like, we'll figure it out later, like, that seems like a terrible way to operate. So yeah, I don't even know enough to even have a discussion about it, quite frankly. So I don't think I don't know what I need to hear, but I think it's a little out there for me.
And it seems like the citations for the lower amounts of marijuana possession are already as low as they can be, and those people are getting assistance if they need it. And I don't know how big of an impact it would actually have, because yes, there definitely is a race disparity, and there definitely is racism playing into all of this, and but I don't know that decriminalizing possession and dealing and all of that is going to have the effect on racism that we want it to. Yeah, I need a lot more information also. And I don't know if we can, is there more information that you want someone to get at this point?
I don't think we need to spend money on finding out these things. I agree, like, if it's still illegal nationally, doesn't seem like the city of Verona should be at the forefront of trying to legalize things in the state. So maybe let the state take care of that as well.
Yeah, Ryan, if you want to come with a more focused request, I think that would be helpful. I think your request is so broad that it's really hard for us to hone in on what you're trying to solve here. And some of these are social problems and society problems that I don't know that we can take on as a city of Verona. Some of this might require research and more expert testimony and whatnot that are beyond our ability to answer. And when I say our ability, it's lots of expertise, lots of money to do research. We got to do our own validation. This is kind of state size level responsibilities. So, Adam, you have something to add?
Yeah, did you want us to at all look into the kind of marijuana aspect of this? I know at one point we had looked into, before we came here, we had looked into the amount, the fine amount, the forfeiture amount. Is that something you want us to continue to work on, or does the committee have any interest in that or not, I guess? Looking for direction if that is a topic of interest, or do you want the data and more information before you consider that?
I personally do not. I think it's still a state question. I think, I think if there are other people on the council that are interested in that, they can possibly bring it to a council meeting, but here in public safety, I'm not interested.
Well, you said you had been working on it, so I guess I'd be interested to know what you've discovered so far and potentially continue the work.
We had looked at reducing the fine in the ordinance. I think, we had exchanged a couple drafts, and Mayor Diaz was on this as well, looking at, reducing that. I think the last draft had it at $10 for potential municipal kind of fine. That does not include the court costs, though. The court costs, we still need to apply those, and that is, I believe the court costs would be $73.60. So the overall ticket for that would be about $83.60, give or take, depending on the final numbers. But that was something we had looked at as well before we kind of had the holistic kind of request of looking at kind of everything. So we had looked at kind of reducing that fine amount. Is there any interest with that or not? I think Jesse, I think you're right.
It's 172, but we can confirm that.
And
Have to go to court, right?
And plus court costs. Oh, no, okay.
Okay.
No?
No, not plus court
Okay,
costs.
I'm sorry.
That is the fine, that is the total. With court costs, I believe it's 172, but we can confirm that.
So could we consider that
but
also?
what's the benefit of doing this? What are we solving? Is the question.
You're decriminalizing,
No?
you're not yeah, go ahead.
You would lower the fine associated with the citation. That's because you have the ability to establish for your own municipal violations, you have the ability to establish what that initial fine is. Now, the court costs have to be applied, but you have the ability to establish that initial fine. So you're not decriminalizing anything. It's still going to be a municipal citation if it's received, but that's where your power is. In my opinion, without having doing the research, just going from general municipal powers, I do believe you have the ability to control the fines for your municipal citations.
So just like we had talked about parking and increasing the fine.
Correct.
To
It's the
deter
exact same thing.
people from breaking the law, or in this case, creating a public safety issue, does reducing the fine make us more safe? I guess I'm asking the committee. I
Well,
struggle to know.
operating while intoxicated would still be a crime and would still be punishable.
They're all crimes. Again, it's about the
So,
fine and what are we solving?
Right, I'm saying that would could still have the same fine, whereas I think the crime that is just not a public safety issue, not as much a public safety issue, such as possession or, I don't know, medical use within your home, not operating vehicle, things such as that. I think that's what we're talking about, considering lowering the fine for. I definitely would not want to do so for operating while intoxicated.
You know
That's
what?
a different,
No, it's fair, I agree. I guess, given that I would be interested in seeing the data, how much this is a primary versus secondary aspect of, so as you said, you get called in for something and then you discover marijuana, as an example. How frequently is it a multi-part activity for somebody?
I can, if that's what you're requesting, I can take that data that I provided, the 5 years' worth, and try to determine
Right.
each of those offenses for marijuana and how they were initiated, if they were a response from law enforcement or an officer initiated that contact. We'll be able to do that.
That as well, that would be great, because I'm just thinking, okay, let's say it's me, right? I have marijuana on me, but you're also giving me a ticket for public intoxication. I don't know. I'm trying to make this up as I go here. I'll get a public intoxication ticket and a possession of marijuana ticket or citation. Is that correct? In that case, I'm trying to, I'm like, they're already getting dinged on one thing, and now we're adding something else to ding them on, right? So it's a double indemnity kind of thing. So I'm just trying to, in my mind frame, are we just saying, hey, yeah, you're caught with pot, we're fining you, confiscating the pot from you, and then, here's your $10 citation? Or is it, well, there's a $150 citation for public intoxication and a $10 one for possession of marijuana? I mean, if this is by itself, we aren't decriminalizing it, but we're devaluing the.
You're watering it down.
We're watering it down to making it acceptable. And I think that's a policy level decision that needs to happen at the state. But
One point to clarify, the total fine amount is $187, not $170 something. It's $187. So but yeah, and it's such a variety of ways in which I'd have to take a look into these. The details are important here as to the data, those number of citations that are issued and how they come about. They're just a ton of different ways, from traffic stops for other issues to that's discovered to a fight that's taken place and law enforcement intervenes in the fight and separates individuals involved, and you find out that what you believe is a contributing factor is one or more people are under the influence of it, to involved in other crimes, retail theft, and they have, drugs with them. So a lot of what we see is people making decisions while they're under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or a variety of the two. That's what law enforcement gets involved in, is a dysfunctional part of society at that point in time.
So do we want to look further at decreasing fines in the city of Verona?
Well, I think the point the chief is trying to make is this isn't necessarily a drug problem. This is an extra data point to another problem that already exists, whether it's robbery, operating a vehicle, fighting, and so on. I think that would help us understand what we're trying to solve here. Because I think there's a bigger story here than just citations for drugs. And citations, again, are 1 ounce. Anything over an ounce, if I understand you guys correctly, is more than a citation, and do we control that fine amount?
It would be the same fine amount. We control whether or not we're going to charge them criminally through the district attorney's office if they have more than an ounce, or we can choose to issue them a municipal ordinance citation as well. So, like I said, sometimes we issue a municipal ordinance citation to give an individual a break. Here's maybe a more common illustration of how that works. 2 individuals get into a fist fight and they bloody each other up, but they're equal combatants. There isn't really a victim or a suspect. They're both equally responsible. We can charge them through circuit court, through the DA's office, for battery, and have them seek to have both convicted of a crime and a criminal record, or we can issue them both disorderly conduct citations through municipal court. So they're being held accountable for their actions. We're not endorsing what they did. They're paying a penalty for what they did. Hopefully it's a learning lesson for them, but we're not saddling them or tagging them with a crime that they're going to be dealing with the rest of their life. Oftentimes we do that for younger people or those that have not been there before. It's a one-off for them. It's out of the ordinary for them. Something occurred that it's a bad day for them and they acted that way, and you think that a municipal ordinance citation is going to be adequate. Your goal is to correct the behavior through the least severe means as possible. It's not to punish. You could charge them criminally if you'd like, but we oftentimes choose not to. We take the least costly way, least damaging way of doing that.
It's good to hear.
Okay, and I think that that's getting a little off topic of drug decriminalization. We've decided that we probably can't do that. We can't look at actually decriminalizing drug use and marijuana use, but what are we directing city staff to do right now, other than Chief Coughlin looking at parsing out that data a little bit more? Right?
I just wanted to clarify, that's sort of what I was, when I say decriminalization, I don't mean legalization. I just mean making it something that's not going to haunt someone forever, like a criminal record. So that is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about drug use generally, but we did just want to come in and talk about marijuana originally. So if you feel more comfortable with that, I did want to ask for the pie, and I'll settle for a slice, that's fine.
So it sounds like that's already happening though, right? So it's not going to haunt them if I have a certain amount of weed on me that
Yes,
I
so
pay
for the-
$175 and it doesn't ruin my life forever, right? That's already happening.
And it might if you're not a wealthy person.
But
So
like the $175 is going to, like, I mean, I guess like for me, right? If you hear like the ads on the radio, like, oh, like if you get a DUI, it can cost you like $4 or $5 or however many thousands of dollars between court fees and losing your license, whatever. So if you said the same thing, if weed was going to cost me $5,000 of my money in a year of my license, and then we took it down to 10, that would be significant change. But going from $175 to $10, I mean, I don't think that does anything.
I mean, I could stand $10, but I might not be able to, if you don't pay the citation, Bernie, what happens to you?
This is going to be a funny question, but I have no idea how much an ounce of pot costs. I mean, I'm sure it costs more than $10. They clearly made an economic choice to invest in $400 for an ounce.
For an ounce.
So they've dropped $400 for an ounce of pot, yet
If
they're
they have
struggling
an
to...
ounce, they're not getting the citation.
Okay, let's say half an ounce. I've spent $200 for half an ounce. I'll be honest, I have no idea how much a half ounce is. I mean, and they've spent $200 for half an ounce, and now I get a citation for $187. They can afford it. If I can afford to buy that much pot, I can afford the citation. I mean, it's...
I don't think they're buying half an ounce, Evan, I'm sorry.
Pardon?
I don't think they're actually buying half an ounce, Evan. Sorry, but that's, I don't mean to be combative, but
So maybe that's I don't know if you guys wait, what is our typical drug seizure when we find those, I guess, when we issue citations? Okay, that's fair. Part of it, of the citation is also deterrence. Oh, geez, I just spent $100 on pot, and now I have I keep forgetting his dollar amount, $187 fine. I mean, it's, they can afford it. I don't know. Yeah.
Should we put this on a future Public Safety Committee agenda to talk about fines overall? Like, we could talk about the public parking fines and the drug possession fines. Do we have the will to do that? Or what?
Do the courts have an option to reduce a citation? So if I go to court for possession of marijuana, do the courts have an opportunity to reduce the fine?
Yes, and I would say, without any research at all, I would think that would be more the norm than it would be an exception.
So they may already be addressing the economic struggles of the individual there.
Payment plans held in abeyance is very common.
Yeah, I'm homeless, but I get caught with marijuana, and I can barely afford to eat, and this is my form of entertainment. I assume the courts are taking some of that into consideration. Is that fair?
Definitely fair. I could go on for a while about...
That's fair. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to wonder. I'm just thinking out loud how big of a problem this really is. It feels more like a political statement than anything else.
I am not sure if that's enough direction.
My opinion, I think we don't do any more than what we've already done. I think without being given specific direction, I feel like we're just kind of poking around, trying to figure out what to do when we don't really, haven't been given anything specific to look at.
Did you have something else to say, Attorney Kleinmeyer?
No, I just think that, I mean, I think Chief Coughlin's heard that it looks like there's some more drill down in the data a little bit more, and it sounds like that's essentially the direction that's been provided. That's what I took from the conversation.
Yep, thank you.
Anything else to add? Okay. Thank you for the discussion. The next item on the agenda is adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we're adjourned.